They called it Ivora Station, quiet, remote, out on the edge of Sector 9. Nestled near a dying star, it wasn't flashy, no military outpost, just miners, settlers, some ex-soldiers, trying to forget the taste of gunpowder. Families, kids, a place where people went to start over, a place you could die in peace if the void didn't take you. First, then the sky burned, not from a meteor or malfunction, it was them. They came without a signal, no diplomacy, no declaration, no warning, just a flash. Across the black, a blink of heat, and everything started screaming. Jarek was off-grid when it happened, deep in the subtunnels, fixing a coolant pipe that had cracked under the heat shift. He didn't hear the alarms, he heard the silence that followed. By the time he got back to the surface, the colony was ash. Bodies were still warm, some didn't even have faces left, others looked like they died mid-sentence. He found his brother holding their nephew, both fused to the floor by the plasma fire that poured through the ceiling like hell's rain. Jarek didn't cry, he didn't scream, he just stood there breathing through the smoke, heart still. His mind did something strange. It went cold, not empty, focused. He was a combat engineer. Once fought in the Mars border clashes. Saw entire squads erased by drones the size of a wasp. Thought he'd seen the worst war could offer, but this was something else. This was extermination. He walked through the ruins, found one of the local defense turret, still half intact, wires smoking. The system hadn't even activated, they had scrambled it. Smart, clinical, the way you'd exterminate rats in your basement, only humans aren't rats, they're wolves with broken leashes. Jarek wasn't the only one who lived, a few others had been down in the tunnels, deep in the coolant shafts or old storage bays. 37 survivors, give or take. Most were burnt, concussed, coughing up blood. Few were kids, they didn't scream much. Trauma does that. He looked around at what was left, then he looked up at the stars, still glowing like nothing had happened, and something in him cracked, not in a way you fix, in a way you sharpen. They didn't come back, the aliens, whatever race they were, hit 3 other colonies that same solar week. The outer ring was gone. Within days, communications were silent. The unified Earth Council nowhere, no fleets, no aid, no rescue shuttles, just dead air, which meant one thing. Humanity had been abandoned. That was fine. Jarek didn't need fleets, he needed targets. 2 weeks later, the first message was sent from an encrypted low-frequency channel buried in pre-war tech. It was one sentence: they exterminated Ivora. Survivors preparing retaliation. Volunteers only, no politics, no mercy. It spread like wildfire through the underground nets, the kind of channels that hadn't seen light in decades. War veterans, mercenaries, black ops ghosts. Men who were too violent for peace, too broken for civilian life. The kind of men the government pretended didn't exist anymore. They were watching, and they answered. The ones who came first weren't young, they weren't clean, they weren't heroes. But they brought guns, armor, old warm with patched AI, ships that didn't register on official logs. They called themselves the Beasts, not because they were savage, but because they were trained not to be. And now there was no one left to hold the leash. Jarek stood at the edge of the crater that used to be Avora's town square. Wind howled through the ruins. His face was ash covered, eyes cold. He spoke through the cracked transmitter on his wrist, a low signal aimed at deep space. Maybe they'd hear it, maybe not, he didn't care. You hit civilians, you burned our children, congratulations. You've summoned the beasts you couldn't control. Then he turned and walked back into the darkness of the old supply hangar where engines were humming again and war was being reborn. The hangar was never meant to hold more than a dozen cargo haulers, a few surface rovers, and maybe a maintenance ship if you cleared enough room. Now it looked like the waiting room of a damned army. Scrap metal was stacked in corners, stripped turrets lined the floor, and everywhere were men, not civilians, not soldiers either. Something in between, something worse. They came in silence, they didn't talk much, they brought their own gear, their own scars, and in most cases, their own reasons to kill, the kind of men who had buried brothers under alien dirt and had lived long enough to want to return the favor. Jarek moved between them like a ghost in smoke, no fancy uniform, just bloodstained gear, patched armor from 3 wars ago, and a look in his eyes like the universe had already ended. And no one told him yet. There was a man adjusting the exosuit plates on his thighs, faded tattoos covering arms that looked more machine than flesh. Another sat cross-legged in the corner, cleaning the scope on a long-range plasma rifle, while muttering to himself in a dialect even Jarek didn't recognize. No one asked questions, no one needed speeches. The colonies were gone, and the stars needed to bleed for it. They had no name at first, not officially, but word travels in war and whispers become myth. The beasts, they were called because no one ever heard them coming, no one ever saw them leave. Just silence and then ruin, but inside the hangar they were just men putting together war from memory. Jarek stood at the front near a makeshift terminal hooked to a half-broken projection board. He didn't have a speech prepared, he never did. He just waited until they stopped moving, stopped hammering, stopped loading their mags and double-checking their rigs. Then he spoke. There's a reason Earth never sent a response, he said, voice rough from smoke and rage, because they didn't want one, because the Council already decided we weren't worth saving. No one reacted. No surprise there, they already knew. But you know what that means, Jarek continued. It means there's no leash, no command structure, no red tape, no hold fire orders. He paused, scanning the faces. Weathered, dead-eyed, some too young, some too old already. It means we don't answer to Earth anymore. We don't answer to anyone. He walked closer to the crowd. The quiet thud of his boots echoed against the old titanium floor. We aren't soldiers. We aren't rebels. We're not some noble resistance. We're what happens when you slaughter people who were trying to live peaceful lives and leave the wrong ones breathing. He pointed toward the star map, glitching behind him, now showing 3 marked systems, each of them a confirmed hit site. We're not rebuilding, we're not mourning, we're not lighting candles or holding hands. He looked up, jaw clenched. We're going to make them afraid of the dark again. Silence. Then the first man stood up. No name, no badge, just an old carbon blade clipped to his back and burn marks down his neck. He tapped his knuckles twice against his chest. I'm in. Another followed, then another, then the sound of fists hitting armor, metal fingers against carbon plating, boots stomping a low, savage rhythm building like a war drum made from guilt and gasoline. The beasts were awake, their first target was chosen for strategy, not revenge. Orion Theta 3, a refueling station used by the alien faction, now nicknamed the Dravari, slender, cold-blooded things with needle-thin limbs and a hive mind that operated off emotion suppression. Efficient, brutal, detached, perfect. Enemies, the station wasn't heavily guarded. The Dravari didn't need heavy defense anymore. After the colonies burned, they assumed fear would do the rest. They were wrong. The beasts hit the station at orbital dawn. No warning, no fleet signature. They came in with blackout shields, signal dampeners, and cold burn boosters. Silent until they were already inside. Jarek was the first through the breach. His armor was patched together from old border tech and scavenged Dravari plating. He carried a pulse shotgun on his back and a viral knife at his hip, but he preferred the weapon in his hands now, a modified anti-personnel cannon that used to be mounted on a mech's shoulder. The first Dravari didn't scream. They didn't know how. They just froze, analyzing. By the time they processed Yarek's presence, the hallway was painted in bone. Behind him, the rest came in waves. No formation, no tact, just destruction. The beasts didn't clear the station, they erased it. Every power node was fried. Every comms relay was sliced. Every Dravari that moved was torn apart. No survivors, no mercy. It took less than 11 minutes, the last thing the station's AI picked up before its systems went dark was an encrypted human code pulsing through the hull. Ivora sends its regards. They left the bodies hanging, not as a tactic, as a message. For centuries, aliens assumed humans were emotionally erratic, illogical, too bound by empathy to be a threat. They didn't know what humans became when they had nothing left to lose. The Dravari tried to bury the incident. They issued silence protocols, locked down media broadcasts, killed witnesses, but fear isn't bound by broadcasts. It spreads, and soon whispers started crawling across systems. Humans had gone rogue. Earth didn't control them. The UAC denied involvement, but colonies were burning in reverse. Now Dravari colonies, and in every wreckage, the same two symbols were found scorched into the walls. Wolf and a set of human eyes. Back at the hangar, Jarek sat alone. He wasn't proud, wasn't angry, just tired. He hadn't slept in 4 nights, didn't need to. His body ran on instinct now, rage and memory and routine. He replayed the mission on a cracked terminal, watching as one of the beasts, Devon, an ex-Black Site Ops specialist, tore through 3 Dravari sentries with nothing but a melted shield and a sidearm made from a plasma cutter. Another screen showed a kid, barely 20, diverting a coolant line into the main comms relay and electrocuting an entire command nest. He'd volunteered 2 weeks ago after finding his mother's name on the Evora death list. Jarek didn't stop him. He just made sure the kid wore body armor. He tapped the terminal, zooming into the section of the station where they'd recovered something strange, a beacon hidden behind sealed walls, not meant to be found. It wasn't just a refueling station, it was a forward command node. That's why the response had come so late, why the beasts had torn through so easily. The Dravari weren't ready, but they would be now. This was war, and war meant escalation. The next day, they found a coded reply, bouncing off old satellites, not from Earth. Not from the Dravari, from another human channel, low frequency. Pirate code. Jarek decoded it manually. We saw what you did, we remember that. Colonies too, we have ships, we have weapons, say the word, no name, no location, just the hunger behind the words. He grinned for the first time in weeks. The beasts weren't just a squad anymore, they were becoming a movement. Back in the hangar, new faces had arrived. Some were strangers, some were legends, old war criminals thought dead, disavowed field generals, engineers who built weapons that were too dangerous to be mass-produced, even a pilot whose entire unit went rogue during the lunar purge and was never seen again. They all wanted the same thing, blood. Jarek stood in front of them. He didn't yell, didn't rally. He just said they wanted to control us. They thought they killed enough to break us. They were wrong. We're not broken, we're the goddamn monsters they used to warn their young about. Somewhere deep in Drari space on a moon cloaked in sensor fog, the High Council of their hive discussed the problem, emotionless, calculated. Terminate Earth, one asked. No. Another replied, too expensive, too obvious. Then how do we contain the beasts? No one answered, because no one had ever survived what came next. The hangar stank of metal and sweat since the attack on Orion Theta 3. More men had come, some in drop pods welded from old cargo shuttles, others in stolen Dravari skiffs with blood still drying in the cockpit. There were too many now for names to matter. You learned faces, voices, the way a man held his rifle, or how quiet he got when he stared into nothing. Jarek sat on a crate near the comms table, helmet off, a half-burnt stem stick between his fingers. He wasn't sleeping anymore, not because of trauma. That part of him had gone silent after Evora. No, sleep was useless now. There was too much to do, too many things left to kill. Something's off, said Drex, standing across from him. He was one of the first men to answer Jarek's call, big, bald, skin like iron, and a voice like broken gravel. He'd fought in Neptune's orbital ring wars, and it showed. Lost an eye, lost a wife, lost faith in everything but revenge. Jarek raised an eyebrow. Drex tossed a data pad on the table. Scouts picked up signals. 2 jumps out from here. Not Dravari, human signature, military-grade encryption. Earth, Jarek asked. Can't confirm, but whoever it is, they've been watching us. Jarek looked at the pad. The coordinates were clear. Ghost signatures from stealth tech, cloaked ships tracking their movement ever since the raid on Orion Theta 3. Earth said they weren't coming. Jarek muttered, looks like they lied. Drex crossed his arms. Could be UEC. Black Ops, could be someone else. Either way, they ain't broadcasting help. No, of course not. The beasts had become something Earth couldn't afford to acknowledge, a problem they didn't control, a warning the galaxy had already heard. The war wasn't just against the Dravari. Now it was about to turn 3-sided. That night the hangar went dark. Power outage, first one in days. Backups kicked in quick. Red emergency lights flickering to life, casting long shadows against the walls. Men reached for rifles, instincts tight as trip wires. Then came the scream. It echoed from Corridor 3, where the newcomers were quartered, not the raw scream of pain, the high-pitched howl of something not human. By the time Jarek and his squad reached the corridor, the floor was slick with blood. A man lay slumped against the wall, chest carved. Open, organs scattered like thrown meat. His throat had been torn out. Another. Man was screaming, hands covered in red. Eyes wide like he'd seen God and wished. He hadn't. It wasn't one of us, he babbled. Wasn't human. Jarek kneeled down, the cuts weren't. From plasma they were claws, long. Surgical deep. Dravari infiltration unit. Drex muttered. Behind him, inside our camp, Jarek. Growled, they're adapting, Jarek. Gathered the core squad and the strategy. Room 20 of them, the old hands, the ones who'd survived long enough to become myths in the dark. We've been hit, he told them, not from the outside, from inside. He pulled up footage, blurry, fractured. But enough. A shadow moving too fast, 6 limbs. Cloaked in active camouflage, not standard Dravari soldiers. It's a sleeper unit, something new, he said. Slipped in with the new recruits, took one of our men's skin, passed for him. For 4 days, murmurs filled the room. They're not just reacting anymore, Drex added. They're hunting us now. The line between predator and prey was starting to blur. The next strike came 2 days later. Station Seraph 8, a Dravari logistics relay. The beasts hit it hard, breach and burn tactics, no survivors, no mercy, but something was wrong from the start. The station was already empty, no guards, no comms, no resistance. Drex walked through the halls muttering, curses. This ain't right, this ain't a retreat. It's bait. They found the traps too late. First, the EMP burst knocked half their equipment offline, then the automated turrets activated, hidden in the walls. 3 men died before Jarek manually overloaded the system with an old override code, one he remembered from a pre-war operation he was never supposed to speak about. They got out barely, but it wasn't a win, it was a message. The Dravari weren't stupid, they were evolving. And worse, they were starting to understand. Humans. Back at base, tensions cracked. Men started fighting. Not over food or supplies, but trust. Who was real? Who was one of them? Jarek tried to keep it together. He enforced protocols, DNA checks constant. Monitoring split shifts, but paranoia had already sunk its claws in deep. You give men a war they don't understand, they start looking for enemies among their own, Drex told him. Quietly one night. Jarek didn't answer, he just stared at the cracked screen showing the list of confirmed colony deaths, over 17 million. Across the outer ring now, and no one else was fighting for them, just the beasts, just the damned. Then came the message, encrypted raw audio, old Earth dialect, no visuals. This is Commander Thorne of the UEC. Blackguard. Cease operations. Immediately, you are destabilizing the sector. Continued action will be met with sanctioned force. Jarek listened to it 3 times before responding. He didn't yell, didn't curse, he just pressed the comm and said flatly, you let them kill us, you let them burn children alive. If you want to stop us, come try. Then he cut the channel. Drex found him later sitting alone in the storage bay staring at a child's drawing he'd pulled from the ruins of Avra weeks ago. It showed a stick figure family standing under a binary. Son, was that smart? Drex asked. Poking Earth. Jarek didn't answer right away. Then he said, we were already dead the day the colonies burned. Now we're just teaching ghosts how to bite. The next mission was a deep strike. Risky, stupid even. Harrow's Gate, A Dravari Communications nexus buried beneath a frozen moon, defended by a psychic relay net that scrambled most tech and fried human nervous systems if you got too close. They sent 6 men in, only 3 came back, one of them Kriv, an old siege specialist, came back blind and screaming, blood running from his ears. They know what we are now, he rasped. Before dying they saw into me, they saw everything. The Dravari weren't just adapting, they were evolving around human fear. Beasts were changing too. What started as revenge had become something darker. They stopped talking about going home, stopped pretending there was a future. After this, some of the men began carving the wolf sigil into their flesh, not as decoration but as identity. They weren't human anymore. They were monsters bred by silence, raised by fire, and sent screaming into a galaxy that thought it had broken them. Then one night Drex pulled Jarek aside. There's a mole, he said. Jarek's blood froze. You sure? Drex nodded. Got intercepted. Logs. Someone inside is feeding UEC intel to the Dravari. Coordinates, patterns, names. Who? We're narrowing it down. Jarek didn't sleep that night because it wasn't just a war now, it was a hunt inside the pack, and when beasts turn on each other the blood flows faster. You don't get used to betrayal, not even when you expect it. Jarek stood at the edge of the makeshift execution chamber, an old cargo dock now converted into something darker, steel walls, cold floor, just one chair bolted to the ground. A man sat in it, strapped, beaten, eyes swollen shut. His name was Ren, 29 years old, former logistics specialist, joined the beasts after losing his wife and child at Theta 2. Quiet guy, always efficient, never raised a voice, never missed a task, and now, according to Drex's intercepted logs, the man who fed Earth everything. Coordinates, patterns, mission plans. Jarek stared at him for a long time. Ren looked up, blinking through one good eye. He tried to speak, but blood ran from his lips. I want to hear it, Jarek said flatly. No stammering, no excuses, just truth. Ren breathed hard. It wasn't the UEC, he rasped. They're just a middleman. Who then? Ren laughed, weak and cracked. You don't get it, do you? This war, it's not between humans and Dravari. That's just the stage. The real players are above all of us. Jarek took a step closer. Start making sense or I'll pull your spine out through your mouth. The Dravari were manipulated, Ren said. Eyes wide now, manic, same as us, same as Earth. They didn't hit Ivora for conquest, it was a trigger, a ritual. Something ancient. Jarek stared. You think the Dravari are the top of the chain? Ren coughed. They're just priests, but the gods they serve, they're real, and they woke them with our blood. Drex stood silently behind Jarek, his jaw was locked tight, his hand twitching near the knife strapped to his thigh. You believe this lunatic? Drex growled. Jarek didn't answer right away. He stared at Ren. Not the blood, not the wounds, but the eyes. The way they didn't beg, didn't plead, just spoke like a man who'd already made peace with death. Who else knows? Jarek asked. No one. Ren whispered. You can kill me, it won't stop what's coming. We were never in control, we were never the predators. Jarek didn't move, then he nodded and Drex drove the blade through Ren's throat, clean and deep. Blood sprayed across the steel floor. No one said a word, but Jarek didn't sleep that night because a part of him believed it. The Next mission was supposed to be routine. Strike a supply route, hit and vanish. Same pattern, same kill box, but something went wrong the moment they breached orbit. No enemy ships, no resistance, just an open dock and a landing strip covered in symbols, burned into the ground in black ash. The same sigils they'd seen carved into walls of the previous Dravery Nexus, symbols no one in the beasts could read except one. Tarn, a linguist, a former colony professor turned demolitions expert after watching his wife explode in a Dravari testing chamber, he'd spoken maybe 10 words since he arrived. A ghost in armor, now he stood frozen in front of the symbols, helmet in hand, eyes locked. "I've seen these before," he whispered. "Where?" Jarich asked. Tarn looked up. Slowly on Earth, everyone went silent. "Before the colonies, before the war." Tarn continued. "Old ruins underground. Catacombs under the Arctic, buried. The ice, same markings. What do they mean?" Drex asked. Tarn didn't blink. "They're not words, they're instructions." The deeper they moved into the station, the worse it got. No bodies, no blood. Just emptiness, like something had pulled the souls out of the place and left the bones standing. They found rooms filled with melted equipment, statues made of fused flesh, and machine posed like worshippers, and in the command chamber, a single message etched into the glass wall: "You were never alone." Drex ran a scan, no life forms detected, but the temperature was rising fast, the oxygen was thinning. "Despite sealed suits, we need to go," Jarich said now, but the air pulsed. Suddenly a sound, low like a voice. Beneath sound, men started coughing, bleeding from their ears. One dropped to the ground, convulsing. Tarn's eyes rolled back, then he spoke, but it wasn't his voice. "Your rage fed us, your grief opened the gate. The war was the key, you are the vessel. Thank you." Then he collapsed, and the station began to move. It wasn't a base, it was a ship, a massive, world-sized construct buried under metal and lies, and it was waking up. Jarich grabbed Tarn's limp body and shouted, "Evac now." The beasts didn't argue. They ran hard, fast, fire bursting from the walls breathing as if the ship was alive. They barely escaped. 10 of them didn't. Jarich sat in the cockpit, covered in someone else's blood, staring at the receding station ship as it drifted into the void. Then it disappeared, vanished from sensors, from existence. Back at the hangar, the mood was poison. Men were shaken, not just from the mission, from what they'd seen. The beasts had faced guns, monsters, alien tech, but this was something older. Drex slammed his fist into the wall. "We're not soldiers anymore. We're pawns in a game we don't understand." "We've always been pawns," Jarich said quietly. "We were just too angry to see the board." 3 hours later, the UAC attacked. No warning, no negotiation. Just orbital strikes on the outer perimeter, EMP drones frying half the hangar systems and boarding pods ripping through the roof like metal meteors. They came in formation, Black Guard, full gear, full authorization, kill order. Eliminate all non-compliant rogue units. The beasts didn't hesitate, they fought like animals. Jarich led the defense himself, sidearm in one hand, blade in the other. His mind was a furnace. Lifetime of betrayal collapsing into one perfect moment of clarity. Earth didn't want peace, they wanted control. They were more afraid of free humans than the aliens. The fight lasted 6 hours. When The smoke cleared, 47 beasts were dead. Another 22 wounded, but the Black Guard had lost more, and Earth learned the hard way: you don't cage beasts you left to die, you bury them or you run. Tarn recovered later that week, his body intact, his mind fractured, but he spoke again. "They're coming," he whispered to Jarich. "Who?" Jarich asked. "The ones beneath the war, the ones the Dravari serve, the real reason this all started." "What do they want?" Tarn didn't answer, he just stared at the stars, and for the first time, Jarich something terrifying. This wasn't a story about vengeance anymore, it was a story about revelation, and they were running out of time. The hangar was quiet. Not silent, just quiet in the wrong way, like a beast holding its breath before the pounce. No hammering metal, no curses, no laughter from men who forgot how to mourn, just low whispers and the click of weapons being checked for the hunt. Time. Jarich stood alone above the operations deck, staring through the cracked observation window. The stars hadn't changed, still cold, still distant. But now when he looked at them, he didn't see space, he saw eyes watching, waiting, calculating. The beasts weren't fighting for revenge anymore, they were fighting to stop something they couldn't even name, and they were already too late. "We have movement," said Drex, his voice a low, like he was afraid to wake the wrong kind of thing. He handed Jarich the pad, and the feed lit up. Deep space telemetry. Something massive, not Dravari, not Earth, just darkness moving through the system, not flying, not boosting, dragging itself. No energy signature, no radiation, just mass, unnatural lurching mass. Tarn sat at the far end of the deck, head low, a bottle in one hand and a black shard in the other. He hadn't slept since the last mission, not really. He barely spoke unless it was riddles or half-lucid nonsense, until now. "That's it," he said, voice, "that's one of them, a harbinger." Jarich turned. "You said there were gods. Ancient ones, what the hell is that?" Tarn looked up. "Not gods, not even demons, something else. They don't live. They don't die, they just are." "And why are they coming now?" "Because we woke them." Jarich remembered Ren's words before he died. The war was the key. This wasn't about colonization, wasn't about resources. This war, Dravari and human, Earth and colony, it was a ritual. Blood was the offering, and something was now collecting the payment. That night the dreams came. Jarich hadn't dreamed in years, not after Evora. His sleep had become black, empty, pure survival, but this night he saw fire, flesh, stars, weeping black light. He saw himself walking through battlefield made of bone and ash, alone, dragging a blade that wasn't made of metal. It pulsed as if alive, feeding on his rage. Ahead of him stood something with his face, but not him. It spoke one word: choose. He woke up to alarms, not Davari. This time, UC battle cruiser inbound. Earth had come back. This time they brought numbers, 3 capital ships, full assault class Black Guard divisions, orbital drop cannons warming up. Jarich stood on the deck, unmoving, armor half-strapped, helmet under one arm. He stared at the feed like it was a goddamn joke. "They really want us dead," Dree said beside him, loading a launcher. "No," Jarich muttered, "they want to stop us from reaching what's coming. They think if they kill us now, they can close the gate." Drex glanced at him. "Then they're already too late." Beasts prepared for war, not a raid, not a surgical strike, a full-scale Slaughter, men checked armor they hadn't worn since Mars, others injected stems straight into their necks, shaking with anticipation. Every one of them knew this was suicide. Every one of them volunteered. There was no grand speech, just Jarek's voice through the comms. They're coming to erase us, not just Earth, not just the Dravari, something worse. Something hungry. We're the only ones who see it. We're not soldiers anymore. We're the firewall between extinction and survival, and we will hold. The hangar roared, the first Earthship dropped troops 2 clicks outside the canyon wall. Beasts met them with fire and steel. The Black Guard fought with precision, organized, efficient, cold. The beasts fought like monsters. Jarek tore through lines with a modified thermoblade, armor-scorched visor. Cracked screams echoing behind him. Every kill meant nothing, every step forward was fueled by the same thought. You let them die, now we all burn. Drex led the charge into the second wave, gunning down Earthmech with scavenged Dravari tech. He took a hit through the shoulder, kept fighting. Blood meant nothing anymore. Men fell, whole squads erased, but they kept coming because dying meant nothing now if they didn't stop what was waking up behind the stars. Hours passed. The battlefield was a ruin. Fire lit the horizon. Smoke choked the sky. The hangar was half collapsed, hundreds dead on both sides. And in the wreckage, Jarrett stood above the body of an Earth commander, helmet cracked, eyes wide in death. In his hand, a data stick. Jarek took it, plugged it in, and everything changed. Tarn decoded it. The file was encrypted in Earth's most classified tier, coded above top secret. Even Drex couldn't crack it, but Tarn did. He was always more than he let on. The truth hit like a rail gun to the chest. Earth had known for decades. They'd found the first glyphs during a deep ice dig on the southern pole, had their own secret contact with the Dravari. It wasn't war. It was collaboration. The Dravari were told where to strike, what colonies were left defenseless. In exchange, Earth would be spared when the real enemy came through. They were playing both sides. Jarek's hands trembled. Drex slammed his fist into the wall. Those bastards sold us out. They didn't just sell us out, Jarek said, voice hollow. They fed us to something they couldn't control. Then Tarn found something worse, an activation signal, coordinates, a final beacon meant to complete the ritual hidden in a vault beneath Earth itself. Once activated, it would open the rift fully and pull whatever slept in that black hell through. Jarek stared at the coordinates. Then he looked at the last few men still breathing and said, "We're going to Earth." They didn't come in through the front gate. There was no declaration of war, no orbital warnings, no negotiations. They arrived in silence on stolen ships, through black lanes Earth pretended didn't exist. The beasts flew under old encryption codes abandoned during the Martian rebellions. Jarek had memorized them in a former life back when he still believed the military had honor. They were ghosts now, coming home to bury their makers. The planet looked untouched. That was the first offense. No smoke, no damage. No signs that humanity's oldest home had suffered while the colonies burned. Skyscrapers still reached toward the heavens. Clean transit lines hummed across megacities. News feeds played smiling faces and sanitized headlines. No mention of Avora, no names of the 17 million lost. The war never reached Earth because Earth had sold the war to Everyone else, they landed on the outskirts of New Geneva, one of Earth's military capitals, population 10 million, host of the UAC's Black Site. Command Center. Beneath it at coordinates Tarn. Decrypted lay the vault. The final beacon. Jarek stepped off the shuttle first. Boots hitting soil that hadn't tasted real war in generations. Behind him were 23 men, the last of the original beasts. The rest were dead, crippled or mad. Each man carried scars. No one could name, each one knew they wouldn't return. That was fine, no one deserved to. They moved through the outskirts with surgical precision, civilian patrols, bypassed drones, hijacked surveillance. Towers knocked offline before they could blink. Drex led the demolition crew, Tarn stuck close to Jarek, carrying the final trigger they'd need once they reached the vault, every step closer to the city center made the world feel wrong, too perfect, too untouched, until they reached the first checkpoint. And Earth showed its real face. The guards weren't human, not anymore, clad in black armor with smooth, featureless masks. Their movements weren't just military, they were ritualistic. Perfect synchronization. No voice, no chatter, eyes glowing with a low inhuman blue. Jarek ordered no mercy. The beasts struck with everything they had: pulse bombs, shock shells, flesh rounds. The guards didn't scream when they died, they just crumbled. Tarn scanned one of their bodies. Not organic, he whispered, cyber-cloned. Muscle, half human, half reactive mesh. No soul, they gave up being men. Drex spat, just to guard the god's tomb. Jarek stared at the gates beyond. Vault 13, the place Earth built in secret. Place that held the final beacon. The place that had to burn. The breach was loud, deliberate. The beasts charged in with fire and fury, knowing the world would watch. Gunfire echoed off marble walls. Blood slicked the UAC emblems on the floor. The building was a cathedral of arrogance. Towers of gold-laced stone. Steel glass windows depicting Earth's great victories, all lies, all of it. As they moved deeper underground, past the first 10 levels, something changed. The tech vanished. Steel gave way to stone. Machined lights became glowing glyphs. The temperature dropped. The air felt thick, electric, ancient. This place wasn't built, Tarn said, voice shaking. It was uncovered. They reached the chamber after 12 levels. A massive cavern, spherical, lit by no source but burning blue fire suspended in midair. In the center stood the beacon, a monolith of obsidian and silver covered in carvings that pulsed like a heartbeat. A man stood in front of it alone, dressed in UIC command. Black's cape flowing behind him. His skin was pale, eyes gold, not human anymore. Jarek, he said calmly, I wondered how long it would take you. Jarek leveled his rifle. Name, General Van. You'd remember me as the man who signed off on Avara's silence. The barrel twitched. You sold us. No, Van replied, I saved Earth. He turned to the beacon and placed a hand on it. The glyphs flared. They would have taken this planet first. Erased it. I gave them the colonies. I gave them you. I fed the wolves to save the garden. Ivora wasn't a garden, Jarek growled. It was a grave and you built it. Van turned. The beacon is the contract, he said. Blood opened it. Rage fueled it. You, Jarek, you completed it. You awakened them. Tarn stepped forward. If we detonate the charge, we can destabilize the field. Collapse the connection. You could, Van said, smiling. But what comes after? Won't care. Jarek didn't hesitate. He shot Van through the face twice. No scream, no blood. Just a body falling like a puppet with its strings cut. The beacon shuddered. Then screamed, not sound, not light. Pulse of pure thought, rage and hunger. And a billion dead souls crying for more. The ground split, reality tore. And something began to come through. They ran, the chamber collapsed behind them as the monolith exploded in reverse, sucking rather than blasting. Glyphs tore from the walls and flew into the air like torn skin. Drex took a hit to the leg but kept moving, dragging another beast behind him. Jarek carried the trigger in his hand. Tarn screamed, "We need a full collapse now." They reached the upper chamber, sealed the blast doors and set the charge. Then waited. Jarek looked down at Earth one last time, the surface still beautiful, still green, still unaware. Then he said, "Let it burn." Tarn hit the switch. The explosion was not seen, it was felt, a scream across the psychic spectrum. The beacon imploded, taking everything with it. The tomb, the chamber, the fake soldiers, and the contract they tried to complete. Above, across Earth cities, the sky shimmered. Something cried out from beyond the veil, then silence. Back on the ship, Jarek watched the atmosphere return to normal, but inside him something had changed. He could still hear the beacon, not in words, in memory. It had spoken to him in the chamber, told him things, showed him Ivor's fall from above. It hadn't just been vengeance anymore. The beast were the ritual, and he was the heart. Drex limped into the medbay where Jarek sat, covered in blood. "You okay?" he asked. Jarek didn't respond, just stared at his own hands. "They told me I'm the vessel," he muttered, "that I was made for this." Drex leaned against the wall. "Do you believe it?" "I don't know. What happens now?" Jarek stood slowly, looked out the window, and saw something moving on the edge of the stars. Something still watching. "We finish it," he said, "one way or another." Space was never silent, not really. It creaked, it hummed, it pulsed. But now, as Jarek stood in the command bay of the Stalker, watching the outer systems collapse into static and darkness, he realized the silence wasn't from distance, it was from fear. The stars weren't singing anymore. They were screaming quietly, like prey hiding under the bed. Tarn was catatonic. His brain had hemorrhaged shortly after they escaped Earth's beacon implosion. He sat, now buckled into a med chair, eyes open, unmoving, mouth whispering symbols that weren't from any human tongue. Drex stood across the deck, armor cracked, blood on his knuckles. He hadn't cleaned himself in days. "Telemetry is breaking down," he said flatly. "Long-range scanners show gravitational anomalies all along the outer rim, like black holes, but not permanent." Jarek didn't turn around. "It's the gate," he said quietly. "They're pushing through." Then the beacon didn't stop them. It slowed them, delayed the full merge. Drex let out a cold breath. "So what the hell do we do now?" Jarek turned. His eyes weren't fully human anymore. Not exactly. They had found the origin point. Not Earth, not the Dravari home world, but the void rift, a tear in real space, hovering just beyond the Orion grave line, an abandoned quadrant where nothing grew, no planets, no stars, just an endless expanse of black ash and failed signals. That was where it was waiting. The entity, the god, the intelligence older than war itself, the one who fed on suffering, Tarn had named it before his mind broke, and shadier. The sleeper beyond suns, the mind. Without body, the architect of ritual. It was never about conquest, it was always about invitation. You don't invade humanity, you provoke it, let it rage, let it spiral, let it butcher, let it become so violent it opens the gate itself. And then you step in. Jarek gathered what was left of the beasts, 17 men. That was all. The rest were dead, lost, or consumed. Some had gone mad and walked into space without a suit. Others had torn their own skin off after hearing whispers they couldn't unhear. These 17 weren't just survivors. They were damned men with nothing left, and they were ready. Jarek stood before them, helmet in hand, eyes black-ringed and glowing. "Faint, I won't lie to you," he said. "This isn't a mission, it's a suicide. Dive into the throat of a god." No one moved, no one ran. He continued, "They played us, turned our grief into fuel for something that shouldn't exist. We did what no one else could, we fought back." A pause, heavy. "But if this thing crosses fully, Earth won't burn, neither will the colonies. Everything will. The laws of space will fold. Time will die, choking on its own blood." He looked at each of them. "Let's go cut out its heart." The journey through the grave line took 2 days. The ship's hull groaned like it was crying, lights flickered, clocks ticked backward. Men saw faces in mirrors that weren't theirs. Someone swore they saw their mother floating outside the viewport. Jarek didn't sleep. He didn't blink much either. His blood was running hot, brain humming like a relay station. He heard voices sometimes, one in particular. "You were made to deliver us." He didn't answer, not yet. They reached the rift. It was wrong, not an object, not a tear. It was an eye, not metaphorically. An actual colossal eye hanging in the void. Pupil wide, veins like lightning stretching across the stars. It blinked, and their ship shuddered like it had been seen naked. Tarn twitched violently. It sees, it remembers, it's ready. Jarek gave the order. Launch the spear. The spear was a weapon they'd built in secret using scavenged Dravari tech, psychic amplifiers, and something they stole from Earth's blacksite core. They didn't know if it would kill the entity, but it would hurt it, and if gods can bleed, maybe they can die. The cannon hummed, powered up. Jarek stood on the bridge, hand hovering over the ignition trigger, and then the rift spoke, not with sound, not with language, but through memory. He saw Ivora again, not the destruction, the decision. He saw Earth's council van. Among them, a hidden chamber, a vote. Ivora wasn't a random loss. It was the first blood, a sacrifice to ensure made willingly. To protect Earth's core assets, they had offered the outer colonies to delay the gods' full emergence. They had bought time with bodies, and now time was up. Jarek trembled. His body wasn't his anymore. His thoughts were laced with fire, but he was still human, still angry. He hit the trigger. The spear launched faster than light, laced with the hate of 17 broken men. It struck the rift dead center. The eye exploded, and something inside it screamed. Reality rippled. Ships imploded across 5 systems. Stars went nova. The grave line turned red with plasma storms, and then Inshathir emerged. It didn't arrive like a ship. It unfolded like a disease. A continent-sized mass of teeth, eyes, tendrils, and mouths, speaking every human language at once. The stars behind it dimmed, gravity warped. Jarek stared at it, blood running from his nose. You said I was made to deliver you, he muttered. Yes, the god answered, but you made yourself. That was the final truth, and Sather hadn't chosen Jarek. Jarek's rage had created the bridge, every death he caused, every man he led into vengeance, every part of him that stopped being human. It made the path, but he still had one card left, the second beacon. Tarn had hidden it, modified it. If the first beacon was the invitation, the second would be the lock, not to seal the god away, but to drag it down with them. Jarek stood alone in the drop chamber, armor glowing red, bones cracking under the weight of the psychic pressure. The rest of the beasts held the ship together with everything they had left. Drex limped in beside him. I told you I'd die anywhere but in my bed, he said with a grin. Jarek clasped his arm. Time to take a god to hell. They dropped straight into the god's core. Inside Inath there was nothing and everything, dead civilization, faces from Jarek's past, his mother, his brother, the children from Ivora, the screams of every soul consumed. He walked through it like a man on fire. Drex fell behind, dragged into the black. Tarn's voice whispered across the intercom, already half gone. Trigger. When you reach the heart. Jarek found it. A single glowing knot of nerves shaped like earth beating. Slow, he placed the beacon against it and smiled. You made me your weapon. Now bleed with me. He triggered the beacon. White light, a scream that broke time. And Chather convulsed, and everything went silent. There was no sound in the void, no fire, no light. Only drifting ash and the memory of something too big to ever exist. Rift was gone, where it once pulsed in. Breathed where it had blinked open like the eye of a star-sized predator. There was now only blackness, not space, not vacuum, just absence, as if the universe itself had blinked and erased what it didn't want to remember. The stalker was dead, systems silent. Its hull cracked and scorched, spinning slowly near the outer rim of the grave line. Most of its crew were already gone. The few who remained didn't speak. They just drifted, waiting for either death or silence to win. But something moved on the outer deck. A figure barely human crawled from the emergency port, bloodied and torn, armor melted into his flesh. The face was half burned, one eye missing, the other glowing dim blue-white. He was alone, but he was breathing. Jarek was still alive. He woke hours later, days maybe. Inside a sealed med chamber. Tarn was gone. Drex was gone. The others, he didn't ask. He already knew. There were scars on his arms that hadn't been there before. Not burns, not wounds, symbols etched into his skin like brands. Ancient glyphs pulsing faintly beneath the surface, the same ones that glowed inside the beacon, the same ones carved into the Dravari tombs, the same ones that whispered behind his eyes. He didn't scream, he just sat up and remembered everything he had killed. It not with weapons, not with fleets, but by inviting it fully into himself. Then detonating the tether. The beacon hadn't banished in cheer, it had absorbed. It pulled it into a shell of human rage and guilt and grief, and then Jarek had sealed the door. The cost, his soul, his sanity, his right to ever call himself a man again. The universe didn't rejoice. No songs were sung, no medals were awarded. Earth never broadcasted his name. The colonies never knew he'd saved them. The beasts forgot, buried with no graves, no statues, no flag. The war had ended. The Way wars always do, with silence and new lies. 3 months later, a transmission was received from Deep Space Sector 19. Low frequency ghost signal not traceable. It simply read, "The gods are gone. Gate is closed, but the fire remains. Keep watching the stars." There was no signature, but some analysts in the darkest corners of UEC's intelligence division swore they knew the voice. They sealed the file, classified it, and never spoke of it again. Jarek didn't return to Earth. There was nothing there for him. No city, no name, no one had saved. He drifted system to system, under 100 identities, hiding from the war that had marked him as something not quite human anymore. Sometimes when he walked through slums or deep space ports, he'd see children wearing the wolf sigil scratched onto their jackets, etched into walls. Whispers of the beasts had become myth. No one believed they were real anymore, except the ones who survived them. One night, sitting in the back of a derelict cantina on the edge of some asteroid belt, a kid sat across from him, 17 maybe, scar over his left brow, nervous eyes, a makeshift blade at his hip. "You're him," the boy said. Jarek didn't look up. "You're the one who killed the god." Jarek sipped the sludge the locals called whiskey. "You got the wrong corpse." "No, I heard the story from someone who fought in the drift," said. "You walked into its heart," said. "You came back different." A pause, then the boy asked, almost begging, "Is it really gone?" Jarek looked up and the boy flinched, because behind the bloodshot eye and the burned scars there was something ancient. Looking back, something still breathing. "It's gone," Jarek said softly. Then, "Why do the stars feel wrong?" the boy whispered. Jarek leaned forward and, for a moment, the bar went quiet. The world froze, the lights dimmed. He said one sentence, "Because you can't kill a god, you can only bury it in someone too angry to die." The boy never saw him again. Years passed. The universe moved on. New colonies rose. New wars started. Earth never acknowledged what had happened. The Dravari were silent, scattered, fractured, leaderless, but every so often strange anomalies would appear at the edge of the known rim. A ship spotted in multiple places at once. A scarred man walking alone through war zones, untouched. A single figure tearing through pirate fleets with a weapon that pulsed like it was alive. And always, just before vanishing, a signal was heard. "You summoned the beasts we remember." In time, legends returned, not of heroes, but of monsters that guarded the gates of space. Wolves in human skin, the last men left from a war no one spoke of. They said one of them still walked the stars, burned, broken, but watching, because the gods hadn't won. But they weren't gone either. They were waiting. And so was he. Final words. Jarek sat alone on a forgotten moon, boots buried in dust, watching the stars blink in and out. A small fire crackled beside him, not for warmth, just to prove the void hadn't swallowed everything yet. He held the beacon's shattered remains in his hand. It no longer glowed. It was dead like everything else. He should have died with it, but something inside him refused. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was rage, or maybe it was the last thing the God had whispered before the end. "We are not finished." Jarek closed his eye, smiled, and whispered back, "Neither am."